Thanks for tuning into a special Behind Enemy Lines edition of Another Dolphins Podcast. Joining me on today's show is Mookie Alexander. He is the producer at Field Gulls and a contributor for SB Nation. He can be found on X, on Twitter, at Mookie Alexander. Mookie, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
It's great to be on, Jake. As we said before our recording started, we don't get to do this matchup very often because it's once every 4 years. Those AFC days are long gone. These teams are linked quite tightly through past playoff games, whether it was the Marino year in '84 or the final game of the Kingdom in 1999, Marino's final playoff win or final win of his career. So the only way we can play each other in the, outside the regular season is if it goes to the Super Bowl. But something tells me that that's probably not happening this year for a variety of reasons. But nevertheless, this should be an interesting game this weekend.
There's always a tweet that goes around about the Seattle Seahawks, and I think it's along the lines of they've never played a normal game. It's kind of a joke. There's always something unique happening. And we were even talking about the sprinkler game in 2012, Ryan Tannehill and Russell Wilson's first year. So it's a long trip for the Dolphins, but, we love the NFL because it's unpredictable. When you consider the Seahawks and the Dolphins, that's multiplying.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's a Kevin Harlan game on CBS. So prepare for maximum chaos.
Perfectly put. So the Dolphins are making the long haul trip to face the Seattle Seahawks, who are 2-0 on the early year. They won 26-20 at home against the Denver Broncos in Week 1, and they also had an impressive 23-20 comeback win over the New England Patriots last week at Gillette Stadium. Mookie, we spend 5-6 months just gearing up for the season. And, it only takes a couple weeks for all those thoughts, all those opinions to go right out the window. So what are some of your early impressions about the Seattle Seahawks? And is there anything that's really blindsided you so far?
Well, on the positive side, the passing game outside of the first couple of possessions against the Denver Broncos, where Geno Smith got picked on the second play of the season, the passing game looks crisp and could be crisper if the offensive line was better. Jackson Smith and Jigba and DK Metcalf both with over 10 catches and 100 yards against the Patriots. That's the first time we've ever had that in Seahawks history. Two receiving options, both having over 10 catches or at least 10 catches and at least 100 receiving yards. So I'm liking that from the new offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb. And the Seahawks have needed that because, again, the running game looks to be in a bit of a difficult spot. Again, not just the offensive line, but because of the injury to Kenneth Walker. So Zach Charbonnet, not quite as good as Walker in terms of making something out of nothing. So I'm happy with that on the offensive side of the ball, that Geno Smith looks poised to have a really strong year. Defensively, the pass defense has been outstanding. Hunter Henry did have a big first half in the New England game. He had 7 catches over 100 yards just in the first half, but adjustments were made after halftime, 1 catch, and that's it. So the pass defense rather, has allowed under 300 total yards combined through 2 weeks. Now, Bo Nix, Jacoby Brissett, not the strongest competition you'll see. And also the wide receivers are a different story because Denver's got Cortland Sutton, but not a lot of great depth below them. And the Patriots barely targeted their receivers. I think there are only 5 targets to the receivers total. So going to be a different story, even with Skylar Thompson at quarterback for Miami. This is going to be a much stiffer test for the Seahawks defense because of the threats that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle pose to this secondary. And it's really the strength of the team, the Seattle secondary with Trey Brown, Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen as your main corners. And then you've got Rayshon Jenkins and Julian Love at safety. So they've done their jobs well thus far, but I'm anticipating a more difficult matchup, even with the backup quarterback this weekend.
There's some unique parallels here with the Seattle Seahawks and the Miami Dolphins. One, they both stole from that Baltimore Ravens defensive coaching staff there, Mike Macdonald in Seattle, and then Anthony Weaver taking over as the first-year defensive coordinator in Miami. What is that Mike Macdonald identity? It's so hard to kind of hone in on that for 2 weeks, but is it that pass defense that just is remaining stout for 2 weeks? Is that something you can kind of credit a little bit to Mike Macdonald, or is that just the talent that Seattle has back there?
Well, they've had the talent because much of the secondary was already there last season. Love, Witherspoon, Woolen, and Brown were all there. It's just that the coverages are clearly different. They're mixing things up a little bit more cover one, man-to-man defense that we're seeing from McDonald compared to a lot of the cover 3 dominated stuff we saw from Pete Carroll. But also the pressuring is a bit different. Seattle is leading the league, I believe, in pressures generated over these first 2 weeks. Again, we're adjusting for competition as far as offensive lines and quarterbacks and all that. But it's the way that they're generating pressure. It's not heavy blitzing. It's creative blitzing or a non-traditional four-man rush where sometimes you'll have a couple of defensive tackles drop out, and then you'll have a linebacker or a cornerback blitzing off the edge. And they did a lot of that in the Denver game, not so much in the New England game. They kept things a little bit more basic. But I think the whole point of Mike Macdonald's defense is you're never going to pin him. You're never going to be able to pinpoint what he's going to do every week in terms of game plan. He is going to mix things up pretty much on a week-to-week, and opponent, it's going to be different from opponent to opponent. So with Skylar Thompson at quarterback, he's going to game plan, I think, differently than obviously if Tua was the quarterback. So that's what I like about Macdonald's defense so far. The run defense is a bit concerning because Denver didn't have a great rushing success, but New England definitely did. Mm-hmm. And the Miami offense is so creative with Mike McDaniel as head coach, man. Mike Macdonald and Mike McDaniel. I was so close just to slipping up there. But Mike McDaniel is excellent as far as his run game creativity. And there's a speed element to Miami that New England and Denver just don't have. So with Devon Achane, I don't know if Raheem Mostert's going to be back, but it seems like he will be. Just those two, you got a big speed element there. And then it's not just the running backs. You got to deal with Hill and Waddle's potential rushers through jet sweeps or what have you. So that's an area where I think that Macdonald knows that Seattle's defense has got to clean that up, because it's been a big weakness for Seattle the last couple of years, the run defense. And it kind of reared its ugly head again against New England. But I'm confident that they can at least adjust accordingly to have better run fits and better gap integrity and set the edge a little more effectively than they have so far.
The one thing that surprised me so far about the Miami Dolphins this season is they've yet to have the lead for a single minute in a game. And when you're not leading, it's very, very hard to run the football. How do you feel about Seattle's front four? I see some very well-known names in there. Leonard Williams, formerly of the AFC East, Jonathan Hankins, and another talented player. Does that Seattle front, is it a group that you can feel that can kind of push, maybe win in the trenches without that added pressure, especially against an offensive line that really struggles on the interior like the Miami Dolphins? Do you see a scenario where you can slow down the rushing attack there, or is that really all hands on deck?
Oh, great. Your offensive line struggles with interior stuff. Have I got news for you about Seattle? But that aside, because I'm sure we'll get to that later, the front four is really promising. Boye Mafe has been outstanding. Now, he might not play this weekend. And as we record this, he didn't practice on Wednesday. He had a knee contusion right at the end of regulation against New England. So don't know if he's a lock to play. And then Uchenna Nwosu has been injured since the end of preseason. And he was considered to be Seattle's best pass rusher. But now I question that the way Maffe's played. It doesn't look like he'll be playing this week either. So Seattle could be down as top two edge rushers. Now, on the interior, you've got Leonard Williams. And Leonard Williams has just been fantastic. He leads the league in quarterback hits through 2 weeks. He's just been a monster on the interior, both as a pass rusher and also helping stop the run. You mentioned Jonathan Hankins. He's pretty much just limited to run stuffing duties. But Byron Murphy, the first-round rookie out of Texas, he has been really good through these 2 games. He's had his rookie moments in terms of getting washed out in some run plays, but the frequency at which he's getting double teams is pretty noticeable, even dating back to preseason. And he got his first sack last week, albeit a half sack alongside Leonard Williams against the Patriots. And it was an important one, too, because it pushed the Patriots out to a longer field goal, which eventually got blocked. And Seattle was able to stay down 3 and not 6. But Murphy is going to be, I think, a very important player for years to come for Seattle. And it pertains to this weekend. He can definitely pose problems for Miami's offensive line, especially on the interior, because that's where he plays pretty much exclusively. And then you also have Jaron Reed, who is a veteran. He is primarily a run stuffer, but he gained a lot of respect as a pass rusher pretty quickly when he was first in Seattle back in 2016. So the Seattle defensive front, while not, to me, not top 2, not top 3 or anything, is still very, very formidable. Now, against the run, again, they're still a bit shaky, but we'll probably need a few more weeks to figure out if that's a season-long trend or if it's just New England's offensive line and run scheme is a little bit better than we're giving credit for.
One of the a unique twist to this offseason is the Dolphins and Seahawks traded linebackers, but not really. Jerome Baker signs with the Seattle Seahawks after I think it was 7-8 years in Miami. And then Jordan Brooks, he signed a 3-year deal with the Dolphins. I hate giving two-part questions, but I wanted to ask who won that trade, and were you surprised to see that Jordan Brooks wasn't re-signed? I mean, a former first-round pick about to enter his prime, those are usually the players you try to lock up.
As far as who won the trade, well, it's too early to tell. Because of course it's not really a trade. You've got Brooks signing for a 3-year contract and Jerome Baker's on a 1-year prove-it deal of sorts. And again, Baker's another person who might not play this Sunday. I mean, Seattle's injury report, about a third of the entire active roster was on the injury report for Wednesday. I hope that decreases for Thursday and into Friday, but it's still worth monitoring because Baker missed a lot of training camp and into preseason with a hamstring issue and another injury before that. He did play week 1. He looked pretty good. He got a fumble recovery that led to a field goal against the Broncos. And then week 2, he was questionable to begin with. And then he didn't play again after halftime. So his hamstring seems to be bothering him quite a bit. So we'll have to monitor that in due time. But Jordan Brooks, so far, he looks good in Miami. And as far as whether I was surprised when Seattle didn't re-sign him, I was a little surprised they didn't re-sign him at that price. Because that wasn't some outrageous contract. It's about $10 million a year, if that, and that's assuming he hits certain incentives and whatnot. So I just feel like Seattle just wanted to reset at certain positions, and that's what they did at linebacker. They moved on from Brooks. They didn't re-sign Bobby Wagner. So you get Baker, you get Tyrell Dodson from Buffalo, who's looking quite impressive through 2 weeks. So I'm sure that Brooks would love to have a revenge game against the Seahawks, that's for sure. And he is talented enough to make things difficult for Seattle's offense. But as far as who won the trade and all that, again, too early to tell. I like what I see from Baker. But if he's not on the field, then right now it's advantage Brooks, I guess you could say.
The best ability is availability. That is for sure. We got to talk about Geno Smith because through 2 weeks, we all saw the long pass, the broken coverage to DK Metcalf. But I mean, Smith has been powering this offense, completing 74% of passes, averaging 250 yards per game, 2 touchdowns to 1 interception, but he has been sacked 5 times. Where's your confidence level on the Seattle Seahawks' ability to move the football? And can Geno Smith really continue this streak where he's being the guy to move the football? And then you have someone like Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's averaging less than 10 yards per reception. But a lot of those receptions are also this extension of the rushing attack, where we're seeing a lot of this too high safety look, where someone like him can eat underneath a little bit more.
Yeah, Geno has been fantastic. I'd say from about the second half of the Broncos game through the whole of the Patriots game, he's been fantastic. And yeah, the 5 sacks, I think a worse quarterback would have been sacked 11, 12 times behind that offensive line because the pressure rate he's dealing with is, again, above average. And a lot of it is due to the injuries to Abe Lucas, who's still on PUP, and then the backup right tackle, George Fant, missed last week and a good chunk of the Broncos game with a knee injury. So they're down to your third string. They're down to their third string right tackle in Stone Forsythe, who's historically more comfortable on the left side. And then the interior of the offensive line has been a mess. Laken Tomlinson has just been a huge liability in terms of pressures allowed, blown blocks, one of which led to a safety. And Anthony Bradford, a little bit better in terms of blocking, but he's been penalty prone, and he gave up a safety by holding in the end zone. So the guard spot's been a weakness. And Connor Williams, former Miami Dolphins center, don't think he's all the way back from his injury because he certainly had a hard time with Keon White in the Patriots game. And he's had a couple of, and I know this was an issue of his in Miami, a couple of wayward snaps that were pretty fortunate to not go into the backfield as a fumble. But Geno, he gets the ball out on time. And that's been something that his coaching staff, even with Pete Carroll, has been working on with him. And his time to throw is the quickest it's been since he became the Seahawks starter, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.4 seconds. So they are doing this with straight drop back passing. I mean, Ryan Grubb, even with the expectation that we would see a continuation of play action game, bootlegs, all that, that's not happened thus far. They've only had 6 play action passes. Wow. And then there was a sack. So, and that depends on the charting because NFL Pro, PFF, they all seemingly chart differently. But the general neighborhood is Seattle is not doing a lot of play action at all. In fact, Geno's got the lowest play action rate in the league out of all the starting quarterbacks. So I think that will change in due time, but the offensive line situation has kind of impacted things. in a negative way in terms of what they can and cannot call. But Geno seems not to be flustered by this. The pocket movement is a way to prevent sacks. It doesn't always have to be. He's not the athlete to be Kyler Murray and do a Looney Tunes Roadrunner situation where he can just run around, make people miss, and then throw an absolute dart. He can scramble, as we saw in the Broncos game. He looks faster than I've seen him in previous years, but it's just his command of the offense looks so strong at the moment. And I believe that Smith can continue to lead a functioning passing attack. If the offensive line is just a smidge better, if it's just mediocre, then we could see some special things out of Smith in this offense. And yes, the emergence of Jackson Smith-Njigba would be huge for Seattle. And that game last week was the best of his career. We already know how good DK Metcalf is, how good Tyler Lockett has been and continues to be. But Smith-Njigba not being limited to screen passes, quick throws that got fans frustrated last year. We're seeing him more in the middle of the field. He did drop a key pass on 1st and 20, but that was a very catchable ball and a great throw by Geno that should have been a 21-yard gain. But the way that Grubb is using him all over the field, he provides that underneath option and intermediate option, while Metcalf can be such a huge threat down the field. So all these receivers complement each other very well. Metcalf, Lockett, Smith-Njigba all have different strengths that they bring, some similarities, but they all have different strengths that they bring that can make this one of the top receiving groups in the league.
How different does the offense look when you have Kenneth Walker back there compared to Zach Charbonnet? So Kenneth Walker, week 1, he ran the ball 20 times, 103 yards, really carved up that Denver Broncos defense. Charbonnet struggled with just 22 carries for 50 total yards through 2 games. That's 2.3 yards per. So Geno deserves so much credit there when you think about how much that rushing attack struggles without Walker, and they're still able to get the football moving.
With Kenneth Walker, as much as it can be occasionally frustrating to watch him improvise when he shouldn't necessarily be doing that, you watch the way that the offensive line has blocked, and you can only appreciate Walker's lateral agility, his ability to bounce off of tackles, and his speed, I think, is something that, one, Charbonnet lacks, and two, it's that ability to balance himself in the open field. He really is a special running back. He just hasn't had special blocking. So with Charbonnet, he's a good 3rd down caliber back. And yes, that also means that Seattle shouldn't have spent a 2nd-round pick on him. Mm-hmm. But as far as Charbonnet's strengths, good receiving back. He had a critical 3rd down conversion against New England in overtime. And it's kind of weird. He's good at powering through tackles as well, but he really needs space to operate. As far as trying to make something out of nothing, that's where Walker accelerates and excels compared to Charbonnet. So don't anticipate Walker playing this weekend. He might be saved for the Lions game on Monday night because of that oblique injury. And it's a recurring injury for him, it seems, because he had this last year and missed a couple of games. And he also had hernia surgery as a rookie before the start of preseason. So there is something about that general area for Walker that seems to be a problem for him. But if Walker does play and they're just holding him out and being cautious with practice, his combination of strength, agility, his lateral quickness, his ability to make just cuts on a dime, it makes him one of the top backs in the league when healthy. But if he's not healthy, then a lot of Seattle's offense is going to have to, again, rely on the passing game.
Seattle Seahawks are favorited. A lot of the analysts out there are picking the Seahawks. I don't want to ask you how Seattle wins this game, but is there a specific matchup or something Seattle can do to maybe strong-arm this Miami Dolphins team, obviously going up there without Tua Tagovailoa? Is there one matchup that you're looking at that if Seattle just lives up to their reputation here, it shouldn't be much of an issue?
If they can make Miami's offense one-dimensional with Skylar Thompson at quarterback, then I like their chances to win. Even if it's not a case where Seattle just lights up Miami's defense, I'm not expecting that. It's making Skylar have to throw the ball repeatedly because that running game can be a great crutch for any backup quarterback. Now, Miami's running game wasn't great in the Jacksonville game. It had some good success against Buffalo, but they were just too far back to really push that. Mm-hmm. But if the run defense can improve upon last week's lackluster performance and really stymie that Miami rushing attack, especially knowing, I don't know if Teron Armstead is going to play, but if he doesn't play, Miami's offense changes drastically, clearly. So if he doesn't play and Miami is forced to throw the ball repeatedly and play from a deficit, then I think that Thompson is going to be prone to inaccurate throws, mistakes. He does hold on to the ball quite a bit. And if the pass rush gets there, that could lead to sacks, strip sacks, drive-killing plays. And at that point, Seattle can pretty much be in control of the game offensively. So as long as the game is close and Miami is capable of running the ball, then they have a shot. But if it's a case where Miami is trailing by multiple possessions, running game's not working, and it has to be Skylar Thompson throwing the ball, then it's going to be big problems for the Dolphins. I wouldn't have said the same thing if it was Tua playing. If it's Tua playing and the game is still all about the passing attack, then the Dolphins passing game at its best and Tua at his best can still absolutely light anybody in the league up with that receiving talent. But it's not just the fact that Tua's out, it's the fact that there's also a lack of depth with Miami's passing.
Absolutely.
Yes. It's not just below Hill and Waddle is a problem. Maybe D. Eskridge can be activated from the practice squad for his revenge game. But I'm curious to see if Geno Smith will play any significant role for Miami, because with the tight ends, with Hunter Henry having such a big game last week, Geno Smith, good speed. He can break tackles. He could be a nice safety valve for Skylar Thompson. But all in all, yeah, I think that I'm not taking this game lightly because of the talent that Miami has on offense and even on the defensive side of the ball. But the key to me ultimately is make the Dolphins offense have to play from behind with a backup quarterback who doesn't have a great history of accuracy or great decision-making.
At Mookie Alexander on Twitter. Mookie, you have said it all. I thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Before I let you go here, if we wanted to go a little deeper behind enemy lines and tune in and log over onto SB Nation's Field Gulls, is there anything you're working on specifically that might give us a little bit more detail or anything else that could give us an edge for this game?
I'm not working on it specifically, but our main film analyst, Alexandre Castro down in Brazil, he's already published his preview. Behind enemy lines also is what it's called, about the Miami Dolphins and what they can provide, their strengths on offense and defense, and what Seattle should look out for. But also have some statistical stuff about the Seahawks and just noticing what has changed this year so far compared to the last couple of seasons of the Pete Carroll defenses, and how the Seahawks are operating differently under Mike Macdonald. So again, it's a very small sample size, but early signs are quite encouraging that a new leaf has been turned over. It's not to denigrate Pete. He's done tremendous things in those first couple of years. Seattle had a historically great defense, but as the years progressed, the defenses got worse. And Macdonald had that reputation at Michigan and as Ravens defensive coordinator. And we're hoping that he would provide some change for the better. And it looks like he's on his way to doing that, much in the way that hopefully for Dolphins fans, Anthony Weaver can do the same for Miami's defense, so that they don't have to, McDaniel doesn't have to hire another defensive coordinator.
Do not want 4 in 4 years. My fingers are crossed for that. Mookie Alexander, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I hope you enjoyed the game on Sunday, and we're very grateful for your time. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.